Hi, welcome back to Riverwatch, presented by Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Did you know that there are dinosaurs in the Delaware River? That's right. This ancient species, called the Atlantic Sturgeon, outlived the dinosaurs and closely resemble fossil records from 120 million years ago. Amazingly, this creature still survives to this day. Unfortunately, though, some sturgeon populations aren't thriving, particularly the Delaware River population, who have been under attack since the late 1800s. Delaware Riverkeeper Network has been fighting for nearly 30 years to protect the endangered Atlantic sturgeon of the Delaware River. Though only a fraction of the sturgeon's lifetime, Delaware Riverkeeper Network's advocacy and legal efforts have been essential to protecting this astounding creature for generations to come. Even in this era of fleeting environmental victories, especially at the federal level, the organization was able to secure EPA-issued standards that improve the water quality for the Atlantic sturgeon of the Delaware River. In this episode of Riverwatch, we want to dive in, figuratively, to the rich history between Delaware Riverkeeper Network and the fight to save the endangered Atlantic sturgeon. But before we do, it's important that we understand some history and how we got to this critical tipping point. Atlantic sturgeon are known for their characteristic torpedo-shaped bodies with bony plates called scutes. They can live up to 70 years in age and grow up to 16 feet long. Sturgeon are anadromous, meaning they spend their adult lives in salt waters of the ocean, but will travel back upstream to fresh and brackish waters to spawn. Waters like those in the Delaware River. Legends from indigenous Potawatomi and Ojibwe tribes told of rivers so full of sturgeon that a person could walk across the water on the backs of the fish. Atlantic sturgeon used to thrive in the Delaware River. In the late 1800s, Atlantic sturgeon populations were estimated to be at 180,000 females alone. The Delaware River was so populated with sturgeon, both Atlantic and other sturgeon species called shortnose, that it became the caviar capital of North America. You heard that right. High-end, quote-unquote, true caviar comes from sturgeon and sturgeon only. From 1890 to 1899, 75% of the sturgeon harvest originated in the Delaware watershed, and approximately 36.7 million pounds of sturgeon were harvested from 1880 to 1898. It wasn't until 100 years later, in 1998, when the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council put in place a coast-wide fishing moratorium until at least 2038, stating, "All indications are that the Atlantic sturgeon spawning stocks of the entire East Coast were severely overfished, in some cases to the point of extirpation." Then, in 2012, the Atlantic sturgeon of the United States are listed under the Endangered Species Act, and 5 distinct population segments are categorized as either endangered or threatened. The sturgeon of the Delaware River were and still are included in the New York Bight distinct population segment. Even with the Endangered Species Act listing, Atlantic sturgeon are still facing threats each day from every angle. Habitat loss from dredging, blasting, and other deepening activities, saltwater intrusion, the loss of river bottom habitat needed for spawning, water pollution and poor water quality, boat and propeller strikes, and fisheries bycatch have all contributed to the Atlantic sturgeon's continued decline and inability to recover from the historic overharvesting. As a result of these devastating and ongoing impacts, it is estimated that there are less than 250 spawning adults left of the Delaware River population of Atlantic sturgeon. That brings us to Delaware Riverkeeper Network and our decades-long campaign to save what is left of the Atlantic sturgeon population in the Delaware River. Our efforts started back in 1992, when we took on the Army Corps of Engineers' proposal to deepen the Delaware River's main navigation channel from 40 to 45 feet. Although we weren't successful in defeating the 45-foot deepening project, our efforts were essential for jump-starting our work in other environmental areas, including the plight of the endangered Atlantic sturgeon. Since that time, Delaware Riverkeeper Network has advocated for a unique Endangered Species Act listing of the genetically unique sturgeon of the Delaware River, for critical habitat protections, for more accurate estimates of project harms on sturgeon populations, for accountability for sturgeon deaths from bycatch and dredging activities, and most recently, for rulemaking for improved dissolved oxygen standards for the Delaware River to improve living conditions for the sensitive fish. Along the way, Delaware Riverkeeper Network engaged with the public in new and unique ways to spread awareness about this dino in the Delaware, including through a funeral procession and a last baby shower, which each made for press-worthy public events.
So I'm here with Maya Van Rossum, the Delaware Riverkeeper. And Maya, you have been involved in legal battles involving the Atlantic Sturgeon for decades alongside the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and have come up with some pretty creative events. So, why do you take the additional time to get involved in public events and put them on beyond just the legal challenges?
Well, it's really important to create opportunities for people to engage. So when we do public events, it's a great way to inspire people to want to pay attention, to want to listen, to want to learn. It gives them a fun way to engage. You know, if you're part of an action or a rally, or any, particularly some of our more creative actions, like the funeral for the sturgeon, um, it it just inspires people to engage in a different way. But also, as important, if not more important, it creates a way to inspire the attention of the press and of the agencies. Because when you do a creative action or activity, you're more likely to get press coverage, you're more likely to get photos in the press, you're more likely to get radio coverage, you're more likely to get television coverage, and you're more likely to have the agency people sitting up in the offices saying, hey, what's going on? And then they sit up and listen. So it just becomes an important creative way to deliver the message that inspires learning, that inspires engagement, and that also inspires the press to pay attention and the people you're targeting with your message to pay attention.
So, given how many different ways you have to go about it, could you talk a little bit about that uniqueness in Delaware Riverkeeper Network, going from the courtroom to the streets to the public to the meeting rooms to the phone calls, kind of how all that conjunctiveness, how all that coming together has helped the endangered Atlantic sturgeon?
So the important thing to know at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, everything has a reason, everything has an intention, and every single action and activity that we undertake helps drive us towards the ultimate powerful protection we're securing. You know, when I'm working with our Delaware Riverkeeper Network team and thinking about should we be doing a creative action as a complement to our advocacy or as a complement to our litigation, that's really always the first question. Should we be doing a creative action? Will it make a difference? Will it help us deliver our message in a way that isn't just different but will have an impact, whether it's on the press, on the public, or on the decision makers that we're seeking to affect? But on a personal level, it's fun, right? It's fun to really be able to mix it up and make sure that as an organization, we're always open to doing whatever is needed to make a difference. We don't just litigate. We don't just advocate. We don't just do rallies and protests. We don't just do education for education's sake. We are open to using every strategy, every opportunity, every pathway that can help us achieve success.
What do you think the future for the Atlantic sturgeon looks like, and where do you think Delaware Riverkeeper Network will fit in that future?
I am 100% confident that one day soon, the Atlantic sturgeon of the Delaware River will once again thrive and flourish. And we will start to get back to the numbers that historically were part of our beautiful Delaware River. It is really an honor for me to know that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network will have played a unique role in securing that historic restoration of the sturgeon. We were the ones that have been there week after week, month after month, year after year, and decade after decade, doing anything and everything necessary to protect our beautiful Atlantic sturgeon It's an honor to do that work. I believe in that work, and I know that that work is going to pay off. And it's going to pay off because we have so many wonderful members that every time we call them, we urge them, we ask them to step up and help speak for the sturgeon, they do.